Hello and welcome, Professor Floridi.
Thank you, and thank you for this new invitation. I'm delighted to be with you.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm still, for a little longer, the OII professor of philosophy and ethics of information here at the University of Oxford, and also professor at the University of Bologna in the Faculty of Law. That's a part-time I have in Italy. I say just for a little while because from July onwards of this year, 2023, I will move to Yale. I will leave Oxford after more than 30 years of English life and a British passport for a new adventure at the University of Yale University, where I will be the founding director of the new Digital Ethics Center. Founding director means that there's nobody there. I'm hiring and building the whole center from scratch.
So at the time when academics relax and enjoy themselves, you are moving to the US and starting something new at Yale. Please tell us about this move, this adventure.
Yes, it's an adventure. It's a chance that I cherish, an opportunity that I welcome. I'm aware of how lucky I am. It doesn't happen often that, like in a sort of mature stage of your life, you get such a extraordinary opportunity to start again and start in the best possible circumstances with plenty of support, funding, in an environment that is incredibly friendly and problem-solving. I was not planning to leave Oxford. I was planning to retire in Oxford, but then Yale came and made one of those offers you cannot refuse. The thing that is, or many others, that is super exciting is that Yale decided to play very seriously this card of a new center for digital ethics. In fact, we actually at some point designed together the name and the structure of this center, which, as I said, is at the moment to be established. We will be hiring many researchers, pre-doctoral researchers, essentially postgraduates who want to spend a year or two doing research, but not yet enrolled in a master or PhD program, and postdoctoral researchers, people who have finished their PhD and they want to have a couple of years of experience or more of postdoctoral research before getting into academia. So between the pre-doctoral and the postdoctoral, myself and some staff, the plan is to be roughly 20-25 people within 18-24 months. So imagine a little bit of a startup that begins with founding sort of director. By the time we might be talking again, so in about 6 months or so from now, I should be able to have hired maybe 6 or 7 people, hiring 2 administrators, but roughly 6 or 10 researchers, and then scale up and then full maturity. By the time we finish, this will be a center independent of any other department. It's an institution in and of itself. I respond directly to the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, which is the big container for all departments in Yale. Yale is organizing to the faculty and the sort of more professional schools, the medical school, the law school, the engineering school, the management school, but every other department, philosophy, sociology, computer science, etc., are all, data science, are all within the faculty. So I will be one of the units, the center will be one of the units within the faculty. And therefore a lot of independence, and therefore I close here by saying a lot of risk, because if something does not work, it will be mostly, if not entirely, my fault.
It will be great. So, but is it true that Yale University even moved a building for your digital ethics center?
Yes. So they told me that the building is one of the historical building at Yale, and it's right in the middle of the campus. It's beautiful. And so when they gave me the address, I couldn't find it. So I kept looking around, and I said, well, it's a very old building and listed, etc. I said, well, I can't see it. So I called the dean, and the dean sent me this link. And when I check the link. It was actually the link to the video that shows how they had moved from 85 to 87. Oh, that's the other, yeah, that's those are numbers. Trumbull Street, because they needed to connect two other buildings. So they just lifted the whole thing and put it elsewhere, like a few hundred meters down the road. I was astonished. But that really shows the mentality of can-do sort of problem solving. They needed a space. They didn't see any problem. Just said, okay, fine, we'll just move from here to there. I don't think that could ever happen in Oxford.
And what are your plans for the new center? I mean, ethically speaking.
Yeah. The plans are to, so the center will be research only. We will not be doing any teaching in terms of master or PhD or courses or undergraduates. There will be a lot of course, seminars, workshops, but not actual teaching, not classes and so on. So the center will focus entirely on research about what I like to call GELSI. Is a bit of an acronym. It's based on something that is very popular in Brussels. I just added the G at the end. And these letters stand for G for governance, and then E for ethical, L for legal, S for social, and I for implications. So GELSI, so the governance, ethical, legal, social implications of digital technologies, meaning that anything from the, say, content moderation and platform governance in social media, all the way to, say, ChatGPT, its impact, what happens to data when they are used for training large language models, what are the ethical, legal, social implication, etc., the governance. So anything from AI to social media, the Internet of Things, but also probably in a few years, if we keep going this way, quantum computing. So anything that has to do with this digital revolution that is changing the world and our society. The final goal is to contribute to, on the one hand, understand what is happening. So that is a typical classic sort of philosophical, not foundational understanding of the problems, but also together with a policy-oriented sort of translational approach in order to be able to say, look, no, we understood that this is the problems, these are the solutions, this is how we can improve the design, for example, of legislation or policies or, say, code of conduct for companies, business models, etc. So a bit of a combination between classic philosophical foundational work and classic policymaking, so law-oriented regulations approach to make a difference in the world.
And how is it that ethics become so crucial?
Well, that's a good point, actually. Ethics has become so crucial because of the extraordinary impact of the digital revolution. Of course, we have had other moments in sort of very significant in the ethical debate. Think, for example, of medical ethics immediately after the war, with all the horrors of concentration camps, etc. The medical ethics became fundamental. Of course, other problems like global warming, species extinction, etc., has generated an enormous amount of good work in bioethics, environmental ethics, etc. Now that we have this new revolution, of course, digital ethics, as I like to call it, is becoming so important. Essentially, as the world moves further into shaping itself and changing the world and transforming society, the more humanity is in charge of its own destiny, the more ethics becomes something that we need to apply to what we do with the world and with ourselves. And it's not just a matter of what should I be, who should I become, my virtues, but it's also fundamentally how do we want to, say, regulate in a soft sense, so companies? How do we want to make sure that people have the right approach to consumption? Or what is the proper behavior online? What kind of issues are going to be generated by artificial intelligence, and how do we cope with them, etc.? So I see ethics as becoming more and more important as humanity moves from just understanding the world to transforming the world. The more you transform it, the more you need to understand what is the right way of doing it.
I would like now to retrace some of your work, starting with the foundation of ethics and philosophy of information. You were a real pioneer.
Yeah, I started a long time ago. I think it was maybe just a lucky guess. I was a young researcher in his no, he's in his 20s, basically. We're talking quite a few years ago, more than 30. The digital revolution, I thought it was obvious, but maybe it was obvious only to anyone who was looking for it. But it was the time of the internet. Of course, AI had gone through its winter, so there wasn't much discussion about AI. Symbolic AI wasn't going very far, but the internet was obviously going to make a profound, irreversible, historical change in our society. And this was already clear at the end of the 80s. I mean, the internet had already been around for a while, especially academically, in the military, etc. And so all it took was to say a bit of courage and say, I think I'm going to bet on the fact that this digital revolution is going to be as crucial as the industrial or agricultural. That is going to be so transformative that people will not even understand what the world was before it, before, say, Google, Netflix, ChatGPT, your mobile phone, etc., driverless cars, etc. And well, since we are here, I got lucky. It was a good bet.
Yes. An impressive concept of yours is infra-ethics. I really like it. That is, quote, the design of environment that can facilitate ethical choices, actions, or process. Would you like to explain that quote?
Yes, I think that ethics, because it's such a fundamental discipline, especially in philosophy, we've been working as philosophers on ethics for millennia. I also have the impression that sometimes can be very conservative and not explore what is left and right, so to speak, outside the main path. I mean, infra-ethics is such an obvious concept, and I just don't think it's particularly original. But you just have to look for it. It's on the side of the main road that we've been sort of traveling through. And it's quite a simple idea. In an environment in which some conditions facilitate good behavior and tend to limit or discourage bad behavior, how do you study these conditions? Because in themselves, they're not ethical, but they facilitate or provide an incentives for ethical behavior. Let me give you a very silly example. I suppose that you want to renew your driving license, and you just need to answer whether you like or not. You're not forced. You're not sort of you don't get a pre-formatted answer. But before you can renew your driving license, someone asks you, would you like to be an organ donor or not? That question in itself is rather neutral. I mean, it's not a good question, an ethically good question, but it does provide that slight incentive. They say, well, you know what, I've been wanting to do this for years, and I never found the time. I never went and clicked. So what do I need to do to begin? Oh, just click here, click, 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 and no, you become an organ donor, which normally in a society like ours, we think is a good thing. And so all of a sudden, something that is in the design of our behavior has generated some good outcome, a positive sort of ethically good sort of result. What it took was the infrastructure that was facilitating a good behavior. And that's what I call infra-ethics. So the analogy here, and I close, is with, I came up with this sort of concept by looking at the economy of a country. The economy of a country is made also of infrastructure. Now, an infrastructure is not, probably not oversimplifying, producing wealth. I mean, if you have say a motorway or airports or transports or say good internet connection and so on, they don't immediately themselves produce wealth and sort of profit. They don't enrich a country, but they are the conditions of possibility, to put it in more Kantian terms, for a society to grow, to have more wealth that can be distributed, etc. So they are infrastructure for good economy. And so I thought, okay, well, what is a good infrastructure for a good behavior? And that's how I call it, infra-ethics. But deep down, I think it's a quite simple concept.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, it's you have to say it, and then it sounds simple. But first, you have to listen to it. I think many politicians could grow also with that. Okay, But The Green and the Blue is the title of one of your books. How can the green and the blue intertwine?
That's another simple idea. And maybe it's one of those ideas that once you're told, you say, yeah, obvious. I mean, what's the because for a long time, technology and nature have been interpreted as enemies. So either you have good technology and therefore a bad impact on the environment, say, no, the cars, for example, or central heating, etc. Well, the nature suffers, or you protect nature, but then you don't want to have, say, cars around, let's say. So that world was a world in which the analog technology was an enemy of nature. Digital technology can be a friend of nature. Let me give you again an example. We might be able to develop really valuable electric cars that consume good energy. No, a lot depends on where that electricity comes from, of course. But if you start now having that electricity coming from good renewable sources, well, you have the whole full cycle. At that point, digital technology, which enables all this and facilitates all this, is a good technology. Or you could have, for example, central heating. I mean, the way in which today we are using central heating, thanks to smart thermostats, is incomparable. I mean, we consume a fraction of what we used in the past. Or say LED instead of a bulb instead of a candle. I mean, to have the light that you want, you would have to have thousands of candles or hundreds of, say, lamps, or maybe just a few LEDs, which consume a fraction, again, of the energy. So these are just trivial examples of how the blue of, say, the digital world can be a friend of the green of all habitats. The last point to stress is that I really like in the book, I stress all habitats, because it's not just the natural habitat of biological context, but also social habitats, the economic habitat, the environments where we spend time. So it could be the urban environment, it could be the house, etc. So wherever there is a space that we inhabit, what the blue can be of great help if we do things properly of that space. The if is crucial, and I close here. Sometimes we misuse the digital, and then the digital becomes an enemy of, the blue becomes an enemy of the green, but it's our fault. We could use, for example, a lot of artificial intelligence to support the UN SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. We did a research recently here in Oxford, which is completed, and we found that there were more than 120 projects around the world using AI, as a matter of fact, practically to support the 17 SDGs. So it can be done. The question is when we don't do it, but then it's our responsibility.
Yeah, but how does our digital activity affect the climate? So, the internet and emissions is a real problem.
A lot of that activity affects the environment badly. The footprint of the digital at large, including artificial intelligence, Google searches, and so on, is huge. But there is a reason for using that consumption of energy in the right way. If all we do with the digital is to watch more movies, play more songs, or entertain ourselves even further, that's a shame. I mean, we're missing a huge opportunity. All I'm saying is that we have a fantastic resource which should be put at the service of the environment and society, both in terms of more equality in society and in terms of climate change. If we use it only to increase the consumption of energy without even thinking about it, well, that not only we have missed a great opportunity, but we are in a sort of a way criminal because we are killing the planet and ourselves on this planet.
Yeah. The European Union is a real regulatory superpower, and you are working on this regulation. Can you give us an overview of the recent European regulation AIA, and what are the differences to the Chinese rules? Just short.
Europe, some time ago, took this particular approach, which I share and I support, of making sure that whoever produces the technology And these days, especially American companies, but it could be Chinese, it could be Europeans in some sectors, for example. Europe is the forefront of research. So wherever the technology comes, digital technology, Europe will provide the ethical legal framework. It's easier for Europe to do that because Europe has as an approach, it looks at innovation from a human rights-based perspective. Now, in other contexts, like China has a completely different approach. Of course, it's much more state-run, etc. But in the United States, which is vaguely comparable, the approach is not in terms of human rights and human dignity, but it's in terms of competition. So it's a bit more difficult, and the US has lagged behind in terms of regulation, not because the US doesn't want to regulate. I mean, there are plenty of regulations on anything in the US, but because the tool that the US has to regulate innovation is outdated. Is the competition sort of framework, antitrust mostly, and antitrust is a very much of a 20th century kind of approach, because it's based on cost-benefit analysis for customers, doesn't quite provide the sort of protection that we need today, 21st century, when it comes to digital innovation. So historically, Europe has found itself at the forefront. Politically and sort of in terms of policy, has decided to be at the forefront. And so today, whatever gets regulated normally is Europe first. We have seen this with the GDPR in terms of data protection. We've seen this in terms of AI Act, the regulation about AI. So to conclude here, the difference with other countries is with the United States, we have different ethical legal tools, which happen to be much better at doing this job than the tools that they have. When it comes to China, China does not have much of a concern in terms of human rights first, but it's more in terms of, for example, social peace and progressive development, economically speaking, of its population. So there's plenty of regulation in China too, especially about AI and metaverse and so on coming, etc. But it's not oriented in the same way as Europe is. Now, there's also, of course, nationalistic interest, both in Europe, in the US, and in China. As it happens, the nationalistic interest of Europe are a little bit more shareable because the starting point is more shareable, human dignity and human rights. But they are nationalistic anyway, so we should not be confused. It just happens that the ground is more shareable than the nationalistic interest of the US and China. Finally, I think that the last point is that because Europe has been so much the powerhouse of legislation about digital technology, right to be forgotten, GDPR, but also now the Digital Markets Act, the Digital Services Act, and so on, the AI Liability Act. So there's a whole sort of architecture that Europe is building or has already built. Then we see the Brussels effect. In other words, companies or whoever produces technology looks at Europe, gets itself aligned with the European legislation, and then it doesn't change because it would take too much, and it's just an inertia. Essentially, Europe sets the bar, and the rest of the world follows what Europe has set as a bar. Indirectly, implicitly, it's not a plan, but that is called Brussels effect for a reason. And I'm quite proud of the fact that we have managed to do all this in Europe. We should do it more carefully. There's always room for improvement, but it's a good thing. I mean, Europe is leading in an area that is important and showing the road and the way to other companies and other countries. It's something to be very proud of.
Yeah, great. In a dictatorship or a theocracy, you can implement new digital systems quickly. And what is the price paid for that? So if we stay on this line. So they are quickly with innovation in a dictatorship or a theocracy, but there is a price for that.
There's a price, and we saw that, for example, with China and COVID. in contexts where there's a direct sort of effect between decision and implementation, one may think that, well, that is preferable. I mean, essentially things get done and get done more quickly, which is true. I mean, the closer you get to a military sort of operation where the general orders and the soldiers execute, the easier you can see the efficiency of all that mechanism. But efficiency is not the only value, and sometimes it's not even the main value. One major constraint, which becomes soon a problem, is that efficiency can go really wrong. If the decision taken is wrong or is not taken, nothing happens, or the wrong things happen. We saw this again with COVID in China. At some point, China, people were sort of almost envious of how China could simply decide and order and say, close this and do that. But then we know that the country is still fighting with COVID and COVID spread because some decisions were wrong, some decisions were not taken. So the lack of decision and the wrong decisions counterbalance the effectiveness of the good decision at the right time. The best context would be something in between, where sort of urgent, effective, careful decisions can be taken, and can be taken with the right sort of level of speed. But meanwhile, there are counterbalances, so that if a decision is not taken, is missing, something doesn't happen, like COVID here in the UK. It took months before the government decided that that was a real crisis. We're talking about many people dying or suffering for no particular good reason, if not lack of a decision. Or the wrong decision is taken, and so say someone is in denial. I mean, we have countries where, for example, some particular problems are ignored because they do not exist, especially in the medical context. Well, now that is a very effective way of destroying a country. So I'm not particularly impressed with the effectiveness only. And when people say, oh, in a strong government will always get it right, that is not the main point, because when it gets it wrong so profoundly that at the end of the day, it's better to get it wrong sometimes mildly, and rather than going completely wrong and having nothing to look at in terms of resilience. Bottom line, therefore, a democracy, it's better than anything else because it can repair itself. It's more resilient. It's not the best government. It's the best way of making mistakes. And that is what matters, because we all make mistakes. So in other contexts, mistakes are catastrophic. And we're talking about Nazi Germany, fascist Italy. They are catastrophic at their level, the Soviet Union, and so on. Better be a little bit more indecisive and not less effective, but self-repairing and with a lot of resilience. That is a world that is not ideal in terms of taking the right decision at the right time, but it's certainly the best way of coping with the tons of mistakes that humanity will always make.
Great. So a statement about democracy, sometimes you really have to do it. And now about privacy. Why does privacy matter? Not only democracy matter, but also privacy. So many people think, I don't do anything wrong, so why should I care?
It's such a big sort of umbrella concept. A gazillion things that you can consider private. Like, is it a private matter what I had for breakfast? Not to me. I mean, I'm happy to tell everybody. I'm happy to be monitored while I'm having my cappuccino. I don't care. But for example, it is a private matter, which I would not be very happy to share what apps I have in my telephone. For some other people, that could be totally irrelevant. So I think that there are different areas in our lives that we consider private or not private. It is so important because privacy, whatever areas we consider private or not, at the bottom is linked to our personal identity, who we are and who we want to be or become. It's, so to speak, close to the bone. It's much more something linked with, in philosophy, the philosophy of mind, the philosophy of the self, and much less with the philosophy of economics or ownership. People often they talk about privacy as something that I own. So it's my data, my space. I don't want to share it. I think that is a misleading, shallow way of looking at privacy. privacy is not my data in the same way in which my car, my shoes, my glasses, my pen, but it's more like privacy as in my eyes, my lungs, my story, my memories, my feelings. They make me who I am. And therefore, whatever I consider something that makes me who I am and enables or not me to become something else or someone else, well, that is the private sphere or core that we want to defend. Of course, we can exaggerate and think that any personal data are a matter of privacy. I disagree. I mean, what car I drive, I personally don't find that very private. In fact, it isn't. I mean, anyone can see it. But not only anyone can see it, I'm happy for anyone to record and register that and share and use their data. I don't mind. That's why sometimes people, sorry for the long answer, get confused and say, oh, no, young generation, they don't have a sense of privacy. Of course they do. Everybody has a sense of privacy. Obviously, different generations or different people have different areas that they consider very private. So with a sort of a joke, one may say, look, my sexual life is not private, but what I listen, it is. Well, good for you. I mean, that would not be me. But I can understand how, whatever makes you feel that is who you are, you want to have that private sphere controlled only by you. At that point, we have the legal tools, etc. But we should be careful not to use privacy as if it were a single concept that covers only a certain amount of, say, personal data, for example, personal experiences, for everybody in the same way, everywhere. That is a mistake. It's a bit like saying everybody needs food, but we all like different kinds of food. We all need to eat. So, no, that is essential. But what exactly we eat, at what stage in our lives, in which culture, according to what recipe and so on, but that is a huge variety. So we all need privacy. But what exactly is private for me and for, say, my wife or you or someone else, that can vary a lot. That's why sometimes I find that Europe exaggerates in privacy at all costs on everything, etc. There are some so-called protected categories, like, for example, my political orientations, my gender, or my religious choices and sexual preference and so on. Normally, the law protects them because that is normally assumed to be something that is too close to describe who you really are, to be open to anyone to deal with. And I share that, and I'm convinced. So it's a bit like saying, look, there might be people who don't quite like, say, pizza, but you know what? If you bring pizza, most people will be okay. So yes, we all eat different things, but pizza goes almost anywhere. So yes, we have different kinds of privacy, but there are some protected categories or characteristics that should be private, probably, or kept private for anyone to anyone. But that is all. It's a matter of agreement and social convergence. The very point remains: privacy is what protects me and my identity from anyone else maneuvering, handling it, transforming it, nudging it, etc. And it's a good thing. And that's why, again, in Europe, we have done a good job.
But we users could also take some responsibility, and if possible, keep control over our data, even if it means some effort. How do you see it?
There is some truth in that. I think that sometimes the debate is flatten on two alternatives, and I find either unsatisfactory. So either the data are controlled by me or are controlled, say, by a company or the state. So either I'm good at handling and controlling, or I'm in the hands of another agent, and I don't know what happens. There is a bad model. I think the best model is a three sort of agents model, not only two. In other words, there is someone who wants to use the data. There is me who has the data to whom the data belong, and there's a third party that is protecting or interested in having a better use of my data. Maybe is a competitor, or maybe is say a social institutions. Now, with three, the game it's way more satisfactory, because at that point I don't have to be technical person. I don't have to spend time controlling what, say, for example, my bank is doing with my data. I know that there is, for example, an organization, an institution, a supervisor, an organism that is controlling what data are being used by the bank and for what purposes. So it's no longer just me and the bank, say, for example, but it's me, the bank, and this third party. Every society that has a good management of data is a society with a third element that does this either competitive or controlling role. Take, for example, say, any utility. I don't want to be in charge of checking my data by that utility or another, but I want to have utilities competing between each other so that I can switch from one to the other. So if anything goes wrong, I can switch and I can go elsewhere. Now, one of the problems we have these days is that we cannot switch. A lot of the services we have online by these huge companies are unique. Twitter, Google, etc. So it's either that or nothing, or virtually nothing, say Facebook and so on. That sort of almost monopoly de facto undermines my ability to choose, and therefore undermines what we just said a moment ago. I then have to be careful about what I'm sharing, what I'm not sharing, because there's no competition and there's no third party that is controlling. If there's a third party, then we are in much better shape. So the answer to your question is that, yes, we need to be in charge, but actually we cannot really be in charge that much. The best thing to do is to make sure that I live in a society where there is a delegated third party that does the heavy lifting. Now think about checking whether a train that you're taking is safe. An airplane has been technically okayed by someone. I don't do it. I just assume that someone has done its job. And so I would like to be in the same context now, that when I go online and say share my data with a company, for whatever reasons, someone somewhere is checking that everything's okay. That seems to me, the European way, and I hope we will sort of pursue this 3 rather than only 2 sort of approach, because it's the winning one.
So the next logical question is then about cybersecurity and space security in these days. How important is cybersecurity to geopolitics also?
Oh, it's crucial, and it's becoming more so. We see this in Ukraine. We're seeing this in Taiwan.
On the moon.
Yeah, absolutely. Wherever there are conflicts, cybersecurity, cyber war, which sometimes get a bit mixed in between, is not just illegalities, but also conflicts that get mix and match, and also actors can be belong to both. It is crucial, and going back to what we said before, it is also the individual responsibility not to be reckless. For example, to have computers without an antivirus, just to be trivial and simple-minded, not to be careful about you click on and so on, not sharing data when you know that they're going to be misused. But in this case too, I mean, the individual can only do that much. I mean, it's more a society as a sort of organism that needs to protect itself, and it does so in terms of good regulations and good markets. We need companies to play their role, and we need them on the society side. You can't have big companies just washing their hands and say, look, this say ransomware or this cyber attack or this particular bug is not my problem. It is. It comes with the sort of role of constructing the digital society. If you build something, you're also responsible for what you have built. And these companies are building our information society, our digital society. So inevitably, they also have the advantages, but also the cost of maintaining it properly. I think we're getting there, but I'm sure that in the future we'll see even more leaning of institutions, states, governments on companies to provide the kind of security and safety online that one would expect elsewhere. I look forward to it. I think we are in a sort of transition stage now where no one is quite clear about whose responsible it is when, for example, there's a cyber attack. And everybody's problem is nobody's problem. It has to be someone's problem.
Oh, yeah. So finally, a question on ChatGPT. Okay, you cannot miss it. Everyone is talking about it, but not everyone is an expert. So can you please explain to us how it works, its risk and chances? So you are an expert.
So ChatGPT is, first of all, is number 4. So we have a long season. So in a matter of very short time, 2018, I think. I go by memory, don't trust me, just double check. It's been around for 2 or 3 years. The version 4 is infinitely more successful than the very first versions, and it's even a big jump compared to 3.5. They are chatbot, so to speak. So they're sort of interfaces with which you can have interactions through language. Increasingly also images. The same company also produces DALL-E, for example, which is a text-to-image, TTI, so software. And of course, by now, you can do ChatGPT-like sort of approaches, AI in videos, and so on. It's a chatbot, so you can have essentially a conversation. It refers to itself as I don't know this, I don't do that, so it's a bit strange. Incredibly powerful in handling natural language, all kinds of natural language. It is a trained chatbot, so it's not something that it has a database and looks for answers in the database. A little bit like a search engine that looks around and fishes the right answers and provides a long list of answers that it finds on the internet. But it's more like a trained software that has learned from all these quote unquote. So there's nothing intelligent, nothing sort of conscious and so on, but it has been trained on a lot of data. And from this data has managed to extract the ability to answer or deal with requests. The best way of understanding this, to simplify, is like a chess playing software that doesn't have a database, but it has learned to play chess. At that point, the software is, you can put that software on a USB. I mean, in fact, you have probably that piece of software in your telephone. It plays chess better than most people. It's amazing. So how can that little sort of amount of memory in your mobile phone can play chess so well? It has learned to play. It doesn't have gigabytes of memory in it. It doesn't have the whole Wikipedia, for example, when it's going to find the answers. So once one has learned that it's a chatbot, has learned from the data, but can drop the data once it has learned, the next thing to do is to understand how we got there. We got there through the development of neural networks. Neural networks are more mechanisms that are not based on the classic sort of deduction in logic, if then, if then, if then. There was the symbolic old logic that fueled AI, classic AI, which work up to a certain point, but they are statistical tools. So they say, look, if you have this pattern, this is correlated to this other pattern. To trivialize once again, if you show to one of the systems 1,000 pictures of a cat, it learns to recognize any cat, not just those thousands, but any cat that it has never seen before. Maybe it's missing a leg, maybe it's a different color, maybe it has a strange ear. It will recognize that cat, like quote unquote, we would be expecting to have learned to recognize any cat. So they learn, they are neural networks. They are a new sort of generation because they're called transformers. A transformer does something that we have all seen. It tells you on the basis of the history that it has seen what the right answer to that question or how to complete that sentence may look like in terms of probability. So if I look something like, what is the Italian philosopher at the University of, say, Google will say Oxford, because he knows me, he knows my IP, etc. So one could say, like, for example, Alice decided to paint the house. The answer could be red, green, with a brush. So how do you fill that space? The transformer learns through parameters, so to speak, how to fill that space. So it's all about probability. And the last thing to say, therefore, is that when you interact with ChatGPT or similar tools, you need to be careful because these are statistical tools. They fill the gap, so to speak, which could be a whole page empty, say, write 500 words of an essay on the Hamlet, and then those are the 500 words. It fills that space with probabilistic sort of associations or correlations, meaning that sometimes they invent stuff completely. And to finish with this, recently I had to fill a form for a bureaucratic task, and said the usual reports at the end of the year say, oh, we needed a 100 words short summary for the past 5 books you have published, which is a deadly boring task. And so your stuff is difficult to summarize. Says, oh, ChatGPT said, ChatGPT, give me the 100 words summary of the last 5 books published by Professor Floridi. Boom. And it gave me perfect title, everything was there, but one of them was completely invented. Title, year, summary was like a fabrication completely. It had filled that gap with something that looked like probabilistically okay, but it wasn't a fact. And so I just removed that. I said, no, that's nothing to do with that. That's the book. Give me a 100-word summary of book X. Gave that, cut, paste, bureaucratically, bureaucrats happy, everybody happy, took 5 minutes. Easy peasy. Remember, there's nothing intelligent, no consciousness, no understanding, no mind, no nothing. This is pure statistics, syntax, zero understanding, zero meaning. It means that it's just not treating words as if they were numbers. So in the same way, this is just a distant analogy. So anyone is listening, it's a distant analogy. But in the same way as your pocket calculator does not understand mathematics, but it knows the answers to your mathematical questions, and doesn't have a database, it knows how to answer, knows quote unquote. Likewise, ChatGPT treats language as if it were quote unquote numbers, and answers your questions in the same way. No understanding. You wouldn't think that your pocket calculator is conscious or has a mind or has intelligence. It's just a tool. Likewise, completely different technology, of course, but there is a bit of an analogy here. ChatGPT is not intelligent in any meaningful sense, but it is an incredibly powerful tool, and it will be growing. We will do more and more with this variety of family of tools. Life will be very different in a few years, and I think much better because of these tools.
So if you use it, you have always to double check the results.
And don't put there anything that is private, speaking of privacy, because okay. These tools are using all you put there to train and improve their performance. Anything you put there will be used by the software in question. So don't be silly. Now, if you have anything private, don't ask. That's the wrong context.
Okay, thank you for all these fascinating insights. If you had one wish, what would it be?
That's a difficult one. Personal or for the world?
No, I mean digitally speaking. We are talking about digitalization. Don't exaggerate.
Digitally speaking, I think the green and the blue, which we discussed before. I wish we could really harness the power of the digital to save this planet and make life of humanity much better. It can be done. We're not doing it, and we're missing an immense historical opportunity. So that would be my wish, the green and the blue.
Okay. And to conclude, do you have a message for our users?
Yes. If I need to have a message is be careful. Don't believe the hype, and just spend 5 more minutes checking a Wikipedia entry or a good source whenever you hear something unreasonable about technology, especially digital technology, because a lot of the industry and our culture these days is full of hypes, full of fears, unjustified, full of hopes, totally unjustified. So be more careful, be more critical, get better information, and it's out there. Just honestly, sometimes just a click away. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time and your work. Thank you so much.